Hello, data leads. Welcome to our second asynchronous webinar of April. We have four main objectives here today. In our first section, we are going to introduce you to the basic concepts of data visualization and define what a data dashboard is. We're also going to look at some key features of a good data dashboard and some things that you want to avoid. Then we'll go into looking at the most common data visualization platforms, giving you a little bit of an introduction to them and the different options that you have for building your CCMR dashboard. Third, we'll go into the design process for a data dashboard. There are several key steps, so we'll walk through each of those together. Finally, review some key best practices for data visualizations, and finally, tie it all back to what you all are doing for the Rural CCMR Accelerator and make sure that you know exactly what to be working on over the next couple weeks and where we'll be going in May. Thanks for joining us. Let's dive into our first section on data visualization. The data visualization is the graphical representation of information and data. By using visual elements like charts, graphs, and maps, data visualization tools provide an accessible way to see and understand trends, outliers, and patterns of data. This definition is provided by Tableau, which is one of the common visualization platforms we'll take a look at later in this session. The key thing to emphasize here is that we're moving away from simple spreadsheet displays to more graphical displays of data in ways that let us quickly catch on to trends and patterns in our data. So in the context of CCMR data, that might be the percentage of students in each graduating cohort that have met CCMR outcomes bonus eligibility so far. Rather than maybe counting up or summing within a spreadsheet, we can have maybe a pie chart or a bar graph kind of instantly show us that information. And this will be really helpful as you go throughout next year, monitoring your data to have a really quick look at the data and to be able to see where your strengths and weaknesses might be in a very visual and accessible way for others who are using this data as well. So data visualizations, those graphical elements can all be aggregated onto a data dashboard. So a data dashboard just displays multiple visual elements all together. So this is an example here from the Maine Department of Education where they're showing student enrollment across the state for various years. We can see with their filter up here on the right, and then they give demographic breakdowns for different types of students. So we can see right away kind of the breakdown male-female, the different student race ethnicity groups that they have in their state, and other elements like economically disadvantaged students. All of these different pieces are displayed in different ways and make it really easy to see off the bat, okay, about 41% of the kids in our state are economically disadvantaged. And it provides a nice comparison with the percentage of students that are English learners, for example. So this dashboard is a very simple example. And as we'll see as we go through Rural Accelerator dashboard creation, simple is great. It's clear. It lends itself to making decisions. This dashboard has many, many strengths. But why might we want to use a data dashboard over, a random bar chart next to a spreadsheet? There are many benefits to using data dashboards. They provide kind of one source of truth and gets everyone on the same page. You can use them to build data literacy in your district, to really incorporate data into multiple conversations. If you're frequently updating your dashboard, it allows for changes to be made and successes to be celebrated in real time. When you have data displayed and shared amongst stakeholders, it improves data integrity because errors are spotted much more quickly and corrected. It can increase the efficiency of your work Once you have a data dashboard set up and kind of an update cadence set, this is always available. You don't have to go recreate a bar chart every time you need it. It's going to be flowing in this dashboard. And it also can allow you to increase your familiarity with the ebbs and flows of the year. In our case here, when are students taking TSI? And do we need to increase that? How is that affecting our outcomes bonus? All of these different pieces really show up in a different way on a dashboard than they do in a spreadsheet. And we're really excited to explore those with you over the next month and a half. Makes for a good dashboard. So we have a quote here from Steve Wexler that says, "The goal of a visualization is to provide the greatest degree of understanding with the least amount of effort for your audience." So you want folks to be able to pull up a dashboard and not necessarily need a ton of narrative on how to use it. We want it to pop open and for it to feel intuitive for them. This might be something similar to, say, you go on the Weather Channel and there are all kinds of visuals and charts on there, but you're it's pretty easy to understand what the weather is going to be in your area, right? Like, you become acquainted with the displays. You don't need to read how they work. It just makes sense given the topic that you're going there for. So there are a couple key elements for making a good dashboard. We want it to be developed for a specific audience with a clear purpose. Here we have a clear purpose, which is to track our students' progress towards meeting CCMR bonus outcomes eligibility, and it's for the team in your district working on this. So however your team is defined within your district. Your dashboard should tell a story, which is how are your school or schools tracking students towards this end outcome. As I mentioned on the last slide, it should prioritize simplicity. A lot of times we see dashboards and we can get, there's a lot of wow factor. We can get carried away with the extravagant visuals, but really simpler is often better, and making sure that you can pull up your dash, check the status, move on with your day, take the action that needs to happen. This is using the right type of charts. We'll dive into this a little bit further in our session today, but there are different types of charts you use to look at data and get things from different types of data. So making a comparison, tracking things over time, these all call for different types of charts. We always want to encourage comparison of data as well. So in our instance, that might be comparing this year's cohort to historical cohorts. It might be looking at one high school versus another and seeing where there are differences and how that can help drive positive action. We always want to consider color in making these really visually appealing, and using color not just to make something pretty, but to help drive a story. We want to be very consistent with labeling. And one of the things that folks often struggle with in dashboarding is that these really never stop evolving. Just imagine an infinite number of versions, because as you get a dashboard up and running, either you or the stakeholders using it will find ways to make it better. And your needs may evolve over time. Right now you might be focused on making sure kids are taking the TSI on a regular cadence. But maybe over the course of next year, you get really good at that. So the year after, you're focusing on something else. So the dashboard can change and evolve over time, and that's a good thing. Finally, we have a list here of dashboard don'ts. These are things that will make people pull up your dashboard and immediately put it away. So chart junk. This is a lot of ink that doesn't tell the viewer anything new, from one of the great visualizers, Edward Tufte. So we don't want extra pieces on the dashboard. When we looked at that main one, we saw really clear, crisp visuals, not a lot of extra explanation or extra lines or tables that are explaining the different components in the visuals. It was very clean. Going along with that, we want to have we want to have the appropriate amount of white space. When you shove everything into a single screen with no space for the elements to breathe, it becomes very overwhelming to folks. We don't want to have one dashboard for multiple needs. This goes back to what makes a good dashboard. It has a very clear purpose, a very concise purpose for a specific group of folks. That's going to make it the most action-oriented that it can be. We don't want something that's overly interactive. So extra filters and call-outs that distract us from our main purpose. We don't want to forget that we want to be showing comparison across time, across groups of students. We always want to have that comparative element. And we don't want our dashboard to be inconsistent. So that goes to some of those coloring and labeling pieces. We want it to be clean, consistent, so folks understand the structure and where to go when they need a certain piece of information. In our second section, we're going to take a look at 5 commonly used visualization platforms so that you can understand the landscape of what's available to you and weigh the pros and cons of where you might like to visualize your data as you move into creating a dashboard. So off the bat, Microsoft Excel. This is a program everybody knows about. It's really accessible and highly customizable. They also have really good support available online. With Excel, once you reach a certain dataset size, it becomes a little bit harder to work in Excel. In the case of this group of folks, most of our schools are not very large. Over time, you may accumulate enough data to make this size issue relevant, but right off the bat, I think Microsoft Excel is definitely an area, a program that would be really appropriate for this work. There are some security considerations as whenever we're working with student data, we want to be very thoughtful as to how we're sharing dashboards with other folks and where they're stored. So within Microsoft Excel, we are able to password protect, which is helpful. And we have a number of resources for each of these programs that we will have linked on the Data Hub. So be sure to go check those out for the program or programs that you're interested in. Fairly similarly to Excel is Google Sheets. Again, this is widely accessible. They have good support available online. They are, like Excel, unable to handle very large data sets. And unlike Excel, they are unable to password protect. It's also not quite as customizable and flexible as Excel. I'd say if you're thinking between those two programs, Excel definitely has more flexibility, while Google Sheets, of course, has the ability to be seamlessly shared online. So I think that is one of the major decisions or pieces to weigh as you're thinking about Excel versus Sheets. Then we move into platforms that are more explicitly focused on data visualization. So Looker Studio is part of Google. You can connect directly to Google Sheets and other data sources. Has some of the same limitations as Google Sheets, but this is actually like a very user-friendly data visualization platform that gives you a little bit more ability to share to certain groups, protect from other groups. And this is actually where we're going to be providing a template at the beginning of next week. So if you are interested in using Looker Studio, we'll have a template spreadsheet that you would put your data into, and then it would feed directly into the Looker Studio report. So you don't have to worry about creating all the visuals. You can simply adapt them over time as you see fit. And it's a pretty great platform for this kind of project. Then we move into Tableau, which if you are going to become a dashboarding expert and do this all day long, Tableau is definitely where you would eventually end up. It's really fast once built. It has really high quality, customizable visuals. It has built-in analysis capabilities, huge support online. However, it does cost quite a bit more, and there is more of a learning curve. So if you're thinking about eventually getting to a place where you're doing lots of dashboarding for your district, you're building out kind of like a suite of dashboards, getting a little bit more sophisticated with your data warehousing, I would recommend Tableau at that point. You might be there now, or something like Excel or Looker Studio might be more appropriate right now. But it is good to know what's out there. And Tableau has a really nice website where you can go and look at all kinds of example reports and really get ideas for how you might want to do your own work and design your own reports. Similar to Tableau is Power BI. So this is a Microsoft product. You may already have access to it in your district if you're a Microsoft district. It has many of the same features as Tableau, but again, this one is more of a paid service if you're going to be sharing with folks, and it does have more of a learning curve because it is a more extensive product. In our third section, we're going to dive into the process of designing a dashboard. And whether you use the template we provide next week, these steps are really important to know about because you will still have to think through many of these key questions and take a lot of these actions, even if you're using a provided template. There are 5 steps in the dashboard design process. The very first one being to define your purpose. And this often happens at the same time as step 2, which is identifying your target audience. Those two components are very tightly intertwined, and so it often makes sense to think about them in tandem. In step 3, you're going to think about the measures that you want to include in your dashboard to meet your purpose for your audience. So this might be something like the percentage of students who have already received an associate's degree. That's a measure. And then in step 4, we would take that measure and think about how to visualize it, whether we put that in a line graph, a bar graph. There's lots of different options as to how to best visualize the measures we're incorporating. And then step 5 is to determine how frequently to update your dashboard to ensure that it's action-oriented and useful. So we're going to dive into each of these steps a little more closely. So step 1, defining the purpose. When you're doing this, you want to think through a couple questions. You want to think about the questions that the dashboard is going to answer. You're going to think about what questions it won't answer because, of course, again, we don't want a dashboard that attempts to be everything for everyone. We want it to be highly focused. And we want it to be unique and to understand how it's unique. How is this a value add to the tools that you already have in place? And then fourth, we want to make sure we're getting user feedback on this as well. So you're the data lead in this program, but there are other folks working with this data and using it. And so we want to make sure that they feel very clear and bought into the purpose that you have behind this dashboard. And that may cause you to go back and re-answer some of these questions. Many of these things are really iterative processes and things that will evolve naturally over time. Step 2, we want to identify our target audience. And we can break this down through looking at it in 3 different dimensions. So first, the audience's role. Are these folks that use data regularly on one end of our spectrum, or are they folks that use data very rarely? Number 2, we want to look at time. How much time do they have to be interacting with data absorbing analyses, exploring the data themselves. And third, we want to think about team role. Is your audience in the position of a doer or a leader? And that kind of determines how aggregated or disaggregated you might want reports to be. So you can see the different components that lend themselves to different roles, time availability, and team role. You can think about how interactive you want your dashboard to be versus static for someone that maybe needs to just look at a page, see the key info, move on. Maybe someone like a superintendent. Versus maybe your counselors want more of an interactive dashboard so they can really poke through the data and see what actions are suggested for them. Step 3, again, we want to be thinking about the measures we're going to include. So we have here an example measurement plan from a case study that we use a lot. But you can see how we've written out our goals in the first column, and these would align to our purpose here, or the goal that you've set out for next year in your CCMR bonus work. We then line up the data source and then the different measures. And we've also thought through the level of data. So this is a very helpful setup in making sure that you're really honing in and keeping focused on your purpose and kind of the key questions for your team over the course of next year. Of course, with those measures, we want to think about how to visualize them. So one resource that we've created is the chart chooser, and that's screenshot a bit of it here. But you can kind of go through that document and see what are you trying to present? Here are different ways to present it. So if we're looking at comparison, we might use one of these different kinds of bar charts, for instance, as we go through. And I definitely challenge you to think of different ways to visualize your data. Dashboards with all bar charts gets boring. It is harder for things to stand out. So really be creative here. This is a great place to kind of try different things, see what resonates with your stakeholders, and kind of iterate over time. Finally, we want to think about how frequently you're going to be updating your dashboard. Through the Role Accelerator program, you're going to be having check-ins with your CCMR coach. So you're probably going to want to have these dashboards updated before those meetings. Maybe you want some time to analyze the data and check it before you go into those meetings. But kind of general considerations for this step are to think through your audience and then your data calendar. So when is new data available? Of course, if we don't have new data, we can't really do any updating. So thinking through when you're going to be looking at this data and when data is available, new data is available for you over time. And finally here, we just want to highlight the importance of communicating many different elements of your dashboard to your stakeholders. So when is the dashboard going to launch? How can people submit ideas for updates or corrections? How are you going to notify people that the dashboard has been updated and who needs to be notified? Really being proactive in your communication on dashboard can prevent a lot of unnecessary confusion and make sure that it's something that folks are actively and continuously using. Our second to last section, we want to walk through some best practices in data visualization. And these are things that can really make or break the visuals that you're presenting. And whether you're creating your own dashboard from scratch or simply adapting the template provided for your district, these are all things you'll want to pay attention to. The first, as we highlighted earlier, color is really important and should help your audience understand the important elements of analysis. So we want to make sure that we're intentionally choosing our colors, whether those be the brand colors for your district or colors that you always associate with different performance levels on a test. We want to be intentional about those. We want to use color to highlight our insights. We're going to see a really great example of that on the next slide. We want to make sure our text contrasts with the background, just basic legibility. And we want to know that if someone's going to print out your dashboard in black and white, that the color is still legible. And there's a couple resources here. So there's a color selecting tool where you can generate a palette of colors that really complement each other. And then there's the color brewer, which you can use to think about how things appear in black and white, or for those who may be colorblind. We want to use our text to highlight insights we found in the data and include key takeaways. So in this example here, we're really condensing a lot of information into a small space. We have a title, breakfast preferences focus on protein. So that black protein word is tied to eggs and bacon here. We have a subtitle, 1 in 10 fellow attendees do not consume adequate energy for their first meal of the day. And again, we're using that do not consume blue and tying that to the percentage of folks that don't eat breakfast. On the visual itself, we have our data labels, so which percentage of folks are eating different things for breakfast. And we also have numeric labels. And then that differentiated coloring for eggs, bacon, for protein, and then do not consume, don't eat breakfast, blue. So when we create titles, we want to make sure they're short and descriptive, and any annotations highlight key takeaways. So if you're going to look at this graph, like what's the elevator speech that you're getting from it? We want to make sure data are labeled directly in charts, but labels are used sparingly, so they're not taking over and kind of minimizing the data display. Next, we also want to think about arrangement and how the eye travels over paper and processes information. So you'll see in our diagram here, when folks are reading in English, our primary optical area is that top left. And then we kind of go around to the bottom. So your most important first hit should be over here in the top left. And your other primary visual should be in your bottom right. A strong fallow area is up here on your top right. It's kind of how folks read down. And then probably your least important information is down here in the bottom left, because that's where kind of the last place that your eyes are going to go. And we always want to make sure our proportions are accurate. Data are intentionally ordered in charts, speaking to this orientation. We have enough white space so that things don't feel overwhelming, and we're strategically placing graphics and text. Finally, we want to make sure we're using the right chart or graph. So calling back again to that chart chooser, we want to have the appropriate type of chart for our data. We want a chart that has the appropriate level of precision. So do we need to be at the student level, at the classroom level, at the school level? And we want to make sure that the individual chart elements work together to tell the story we're trying to show. We can tie all of these pieces together in a data visualization checklist, which was created by Stephanie Evergreen and Ann K. Emery. You'll see their names pop up a lot. This is just kind of guidelines to help you make sure that you're hitting all these points. You don't have to try to hit every single one of them on your first go around. But over time, make sure that you're kind of working towards this as best practice. If you're really interested in data visualization and want to dig in deeper, we have a number of recommended additional sources here. Edward Tufte and Steve Wexler have been quoted here. Of course, we've talked about Stephanie Evergreen, and then the Depict Data Studio also has a number of great resources. All right, let's tie all of this back to our Role Accelerator work and the steps that you should be taking in the next couple weeks. So between now and your April individual meeting, please focus on collecting the data points that were outlined in the March Synchronous webinar. They are listed here in this table, as well as in the email that Alex sent about a week or two ago. They're linked on the Data Hub, so there are a number of different places where you can get this information. Once you have the data collected, make sure you go through and just check that the data is clean, work through these steps for each file. Given that this is state data, it should probably be fairly clean, but we particularly want to make sure that student IDs are correct and consistent, as we'll be using those to connect different data spreadsheets together into one source. So for our one-on-one meetings in April, we want to make sure that that data collection is complete, because at that point, you'll also have seen the template dashboard that we'll send out, so we can walk through any questions you have and talk about how to get started uploading your data into either that template, or if you're making your own dashboard, how to get started with that process. So we want your data to be either in the template or in your own draft dashboard by our first meeting in May. We'll walk through it further then and make sure we have the essential elements for the program covered and talk through any questions you have, how to do certain things. And then at the end of May, we're going to have a template slide deck that we'll prepare for you so that you can use that in your strategic planning meetings and really do some historical analysis of your district with that. And we'll have that completed by the end of May. So again, next steps, make sure you have your April one-on-one scheduled, have collected all of your required data and begin cleaning it. So we'll have those sessions later this month. And we'll also have our April office hours on the 25th, where you can bring any questions about the 2 asynchronous webinars from this month, from the data dashboard template that we'll be sending out next week, or any other kind of CCMR questions that you have coming up. All right, thank you very much for listening today. Please do take the exit ticket so we can make sure that all of the content we're providing you is as valuable as it can be. And if there are specific things that you are still struggling with, want help with, please pop those in the exit ticket. We can come better prepared to our one-on-one sessions, to office hours. We want to make this program as useful for you as possible. So any feedback you can give us is very helpful. Thanks again and have a great day.